Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com.
You have to run to stay in front. Welcome to another episode
of Unfiltered, only on Past the Wire TV.
History remembers moments of extraordinary strength, skill, and determination. True greatness is forged by those who fulfill their destiny.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Unfiltered on Past the Wire TV with Michael Wilson in Saratoga Springs, New York. Myself, John Stettin, in beautiful, not so sunny today, Southwest Florida. How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm fantastic. Yeah, it's nice and cool this morning. It was a little warm yesterday, but it's nice to get a break from the heat.
Yeah, it's been a hot summer, and you know you've rounded the far turn up there, and you're heading into the top of the stretch with Travers Week coming up on Saturday. After that, things really start to wind down up there. I know they've extended the meet. They've got some big races after the Travers, but the whole vibe of the place always, to me, seems to change after Travers Saturday. I mean, even the next Sunday is just kind of quiet down. It's all,
Yeah, you can tell everybody's kind of getting ready to go back to where they came from. I mean, it's all out once you get up here, and continues to be all out throughout the meet, and everybody's starting to look a little tired. And I think everybody's looking forward, even though we love it up here, looking forward to getting back home.
Yeah, no, when I used to go every summer, it was the same way. I couldn't wait to get there, and then by the last day, I couldn't wait to get back to the city. But today, I think we got a show that's going to be, lack of a better term, a hot topic. It's a passionate topic for a lot of people. It's going to tie into, I think, more than we might expect. So
Right.
We're going to talk about win percentages, how they relate to possibly cheating trainers, or dare I say it, juicing trainers, and we're going to see where that goes.
Right.
You and I are on a similar page when we talk about win percentage isolated and by itself. Although I'll start with this, although the win percentage at times can be an excellent barometer and red flag to look at somebody who is possibly juicing or cheating, it is not the only barometer, and it is not foolproof, because we've discussed on a previous show why and how some trainers play, and the game has changed and enabled that type of play to raise their win percentage.
Right.
Because of that, I always say that, that's not the only barometer. Yeah, there have been a couple of high percentage guys that have gotten caught, but namely Navarro and Service. Service's case is still pending. Navarro pled guilty. But it's not the only barometer, and it's not foolproof.
Right.
Recently in the news, Jamie Ness just received a suspension. He's been a high percentage guy for a long time, going back to Tampa, a guy under the spotlight. Now he's accused of using snake venom, which is not a new thing to horse racing. It's been used and exposed, and people have been caught with it before. He's a high percentage guy. So when things like that happen, people tend to gravitate to anybody that's high percentage as it being a barometer of juicing. So why don't we start with you recapping a little bit some of the reasons that there are for people to have high winning percentages today, as opposed to in the old days where, Hall of Fame guys that won at 15% were considered superstars.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it comes down to, as we've seen more and more trainer stats come in where everybody's focused on win percentages. I mean, I was talking to a gentleman the other day, and everybody used to say, well, if you had a bad meet at Saratoga, it'd be a wash. And then when you get to Belmont, you'd start from scratch. And now we keep trainer stats throughout the year on horses and trainers, which tend to make people able to follow and say, oh, they had a bad meet at Saratoga. And what's super interesting is how you'll have people say, oh, that guy can't train because he had trouble winning at Saratoga, or he can't hang with the big dogs. And then they get back to Belmont and they're back rolling. So I think a lot of it comes down to, there's been such an emphasis on trainer win percentage that sometimes it overshadows great horsemen. And what it does in turn nowadays is it forces trainers to run horses in the easiest spots possible, which is why you don't always see guys, taking horses that might be 10-1 or 11-1, putting them in a race. They want to enter where they're 6-5, 4-5. So if you can take a 50 claimer and run it for 35 and be 6-5, for them, it makes a heck of a lot more sense to do that than to kind of take a shot and maybe run second or third.
Right, and I think that a lot of the racino or casino or slot revenue, whatever you want to call it, has increased purses to the point where you can run a horse for a little less than they're worth, or a little less than you might ordinarily be comfortable losing the horse. But because the purses are so high in some of these lesser claiming races, you can get away with doing that and not really hurt your owner so much, because you're like, okay, we claimed for 25, we're going to run for 16, but if we lose the horse and win, we're out because the purses are so high. And I think that contributes to it as well. So there are a lot of reasons why, guys play for the win percentage today, we got people waving. I don't know who they are. Look like owners, tourists. Anybody welcome to come on the show.
I got you.
Unfiltered, where we get unfiltered guests on the show, along with horseflies and everything else.
Yeah, no, we're good. We're good. Yeah, no, I'm kind of trying to make sure I'm in a position, because there are still horses training this morning. So I'm trying to give all of you the feel of the Saratoga backside without fully being in the way of horses this morning and causing any issues. So with that, you tend to see a lot of people who want to come out and see these horses and see the trainers and just have a fun morning.
I agree. No, it is a lot of fun, and it's a great backdrop. So I think it's good. It gives us that Saratoga feel. Now, on the same token, a high percentage doesn't automatically mean a guy is juicing or a guy is cheating, but it can. Okay,
right.
It can. Human nature is human nature, and there are a lot of guys that can't seem to stop doing what they're doing, even with all the heat that's on the industry right now. On one hand, I would like to say, if you are a cheater and you are juicing, this is the time you should have kind of stopped and laid low and maybe got an awakening. But I don't think that's happened. I think that human nature is human nature, and lack of a better term, a crook is a crook, and they're going to steal. You know what I mean? So I think it still goes on despite all the scrutiny nowadays.
Right.
So win percentage can also be a barometer. All right. So why don't we describe, or at least identify for purposes of this discussion, juicing and cheating as opposed to overages of legal therapeutic medications, which happen all the time as well. Okay, because they both might be bad and they both might be wrong, but I put them in two different categories personally. I don't know if you do as well.
Right.
Do you?
So I think a lot of it goes into two different categories. And, I still think there's blurring of gray lines, right? I don't agree with abuse of legal medications where as you saw, and you're seeing things like thyroxine or clenbuterol that are banned now. Those were substances that were initially intended to help a horse if they had, an airway issue with clenbuterol, and try and help with control of whether it was mucus or whether it was typically to treat mucus in horses. and to help kind of with lungs and different things like that. But then it turned to being abused because it had a secondary anabolic effect on horses. So horses would put on massive amounts of muscle. So once the steroid era went away in horse racing, people turned to clenbuterol and put every horse on clenbuterol in certain operations to keep that anabolic effect of muscle. And then thyroxine as well was something to help horses that might have had a thyroid that wasn't functioning as well as it should. And people realized that, heck, these horses have a heck of a lot more energy and they're put on tilt when you put them on thyroxine. And so some trainers started putting every horse in the barn on thyroxine. So for me, I don't agree with just blanket use of therapeutic medications of that type of sort to get a secondary advantage than what the medication was intended for. But when you're talking about with what Jamie Ness did, where I believe it's actually frog poison or
Frog
venom
poison.
versus the, you know, what Biancona's doing with vipers. But
Right. Cobras.
with
I
that,
think this was cobra venom, but go ahead.
yeah,
Right.
so yeah, no, those are completely two different categories. I mean, one is you're pushing on a therapeutic medication. The other is you're completely over the line and cheating with something
Right.
completely illegal.
Right, both wrong, but two different types of wrong in my opinion. Okay, you know, I think putting every horse in the barn on a legal therapeutic medication for an off-label use is more of a moral or personal, maybe even integrity issue than using an illegal illicit substance. Okay,
Agreed.
so you know, let's just clarify that. And you're right, it was I think it was frog venom. Biancone was caught with, I think, cobra venom. A lot of people have been caught with cobra venom over the years. I think especially in the quarter horse game. Now when you
Well,
look
and
at,
maybe let's touch on that real quick so people
okay,
understand why that's used. Because for the lay person, you'd say, well, why the heck would you even put something like that into a horse? And so a lot of it is to numb nerves. And for numbing nerves, you're numbing pain. And so people would put that into horses with issues to try and kill the nerve or block the nerve in a way that the horse wouldn't feel any pain, so it'd run through whatever it was dealing with. So even though it sounds crazy, that was one of the main reasons why a lot of guys were using that.
right, and it's not as crazy as you think. Years back, there was a trainer who was widely suspected of being a juicer. Okay, and you know, he was never caught, so I'm not going to name him, but I have spoken to people and veterinarians who were around the situation and have a little bit more insight than the average person. And what they strongly believe he was using back at that time was an elephant tranquilizer. Now you say, why would you use an elephant tranquilizer? Well, this particular elephant tranquilizer not only killed pain and deadened nerves and allowed horses to run through conditions, but it also caused, as many of these type of drugs do, a heightened sense of kind of euphoria. Okay, a big high, equivalent to equated to a recreational drug, like doing a blast of cocaine. All of a sudden, you feel like you're on top of the world. Nothing can stop you. Had that similar effect in horses. So you take away any kind of pain or any kind of ailment from a lower level claiming horse, and then you give them that heightened sense of euphoria, and what's going to happen 9 out of 10 times? They're going to
like King Kong.
Right, exactly. Yeah. They're going to, you know, they're going to run a race that really doesn't show in the past performances as them sitting on. So, you know, there are all different kinds of cheating, and there are all different kinds of ways of pinning out and identifying cheaters. And for this conversation going forward, when I say cheater, I'm not talking about the therapeutic medications, okay? Because that's something I really think HISA needs to regulate and needs to get a handle on, because in my opinion, that's low-hanging fruit, okay? They should be able to clearly define what's legal, what's not legal, and stop off-label usage. Okay, and I believe, and I don't know if you agree, and I don't want to beat the Lasix horse over the head here. Excuse the pun or whatever that is, but
Right.
I believe Lasix has been overused over the past several years. Okay.
Right.
I think that a lot of horses that don't bleed are on Lasix, but I understand that Lasix does help horses that do bleed. But I do not think that 98% of the horses that are running, which is probably how many are on Lasix, needed to be. Okay. Now we're
Right.
taking steps to regulate that and change that. And horsemen are for the most part against it. They want to continue to run on Lasix, and they say, well, it helps horses, and then they all bleed. I grew up in an era when they all didn't bleed. So I've never been able to understand why we were able to successfully run in New York, the toughest circuit in the country at the time, with Lasix being illegal. And today there are many great horsemen that say, well, we just can't do that. They all bleed. So I don't know what changed in the breed, in the bloodline, in the bones.
I think part of it, and to be honest, I don't know, and I didn't mean to cut you off, John, but I think part of it is, as the veterinary work has gotten more and more in terms of being able to find things that we previously didn't see, because I think before you might have turned a bleeder, a horse that bled out the nose, right? So a horse that bled out the nose, it's significant. It's a 4 out of 4, and it is a big problem. Now what we're doing is we're doing endoscopic exams on every horse after they breathe, after they run, and checking for any blood or mucus to try and prevent a bleed, or if there was a minor bleed like a trace or a 1 or a 2 out of 4, to kind of jump on top of that and prevent it and try and help these horses before it comes. So there's two things with Lasix, and I do agree. I do think it's overused. I do think it does create a Band-Aid. I've learned from several different horsemen different ways that you can condition horses to potentially help them not bleed. One of the biggest misnomers with bleeders is a bleeder is a bleeder. Some of them are, but a lot of times horses bleed because of something else. And what people don't always look at is there's two things that typically cause bleeders. Bleeders are if a horse breathes way too fast. Speed tends to have a direct correlation with bleeders. Sometimes you have a lot higher incidence of bleeders and sprinters. And if you do a fast work in 45, sometimes a horse that's never bled will bleed a little bit. And then the other thing is pain, right? So if a horse is bothered with something or is sore somewhere, when they do work or they do run, they do have a higher propensity to bleed. So those two things, whether though nobody's correlated it directly through science, and everybody says we don't know exactly what causes bleeding, it's typically what we see as horsemen. It's either running too fast in a breeze in the morning, or horses going at top speed. And for whatever reason, you see it a lot in sprinters versus sometimes routers. And then also pain related of a horse that might be dealing with something and they're overexerting themselves, which is overexerting the lungs, which then cause them to bleed.
Okay, interesting. Now I'm going to ask you to put on a gold badge and play detective. And this is really a question for all the fan and handicapping detectives that think that anybody winning 30% is cheating. And we've already defined cheating for the purposes of this show. And this is a question I hope some of the people at HISA are paying attention to, because I'm going to ask you in your expertise, okay, when you see a guy that's winning at 30%, okay, what are some things that you can look for that say, hey, this is a guy that needs to be watched or checked or scrutinized because it looks like he might be cheating, or hey, this is a guy that's winning 30% because he's doing it right, or whatever the case may be. What's your criteria as a detective? If you were the guy that had to spot these guys, okay, how would you do?
Marked improvement, right? So guys who, and it was pretty blatant with Jason Service. So Jason Service was kind of a 15% trainer for most of his career. And then all of a sudden he jumps into the 30s overnight. So I think a lot of that typically comes down to, those are huge red flags when you've got guys who've just kind of been coasting along, maybe not producing, and it's not like they're new in the business. They've been in the business for 20, 30 years. And next thing you know, all of a sudden they're crushing it on every single level and winning at high percentages. And it's not always the case, but you can get some of these horses that might have been mistreated at lower levels and give them a better TLC and take care of them in different ways, and they will improve. You see it with a lot of claimers, that once they're in an operation that really is looking out for every single detail, that a lot of them will improve. But what used to drive me, makes me suspicious, is when you take a 10 claimer that's winning grade ones, right? The horse is a 6-year-old. He's been a 6-year-old 10 claimer his whole career. And the next thing you know, switches barns into a guy who's, had a market increase in terms of stats. And then all of a sudden that horse jumps up from being a 10 tagger to a grade 1 horse. So some of those things are red flags, but I want to second that a little bit, right? So again, we've got a horse that I claimed with the group of owners, for the group of owners, and I can't thank them enough for giving me the opportunity to go outside the box to try and find a horse like this for them. But this was a sprinter who'd never gone 2 turns. And so tomorrow he's entered at Parks in the Smarty Jones grade 3, and we claimed him 2 starts back for 30,000. So that's a huge difference. Sometimes you'll see market improvements in horses that were once sprinters that now route, but they always needed to route. So now they're at the distance that they want to be. They're being trained the way they needed to be trained. And so they have a huge jump in that sense. But when you see a horse that's been running at a specific distance, and he's not a young horse, he's an older horse, and is just not showing a whole lot, and then all of a sudden he flies on the scene as this, superhero, those are the ones where I start to question and say, hey, what's kind of going on there? It doesn't always signify it, but sometimes it can.
Right. And I agree with that. And Rich Strike is probably a bad example, but I'm going to mention him anyway. He won the Derby and he was claimed out of his first start. Okay. So we can't really say he was a horse that was a lower level claimer his entire career. Okay. But my point is, there are and have been historically horses that have been claimed, okay, as lower level claimers for the bulk of their career and have moved up as integrated stakes horses. So I would take your criteria a step further and say, when you have a guy or girl, a trainer, that consistently moves horses up several levels, okay, from the claiming ranks into the stakes ranks, then it's a really big red flag, because there's been a lot of great claims where guys have claimed horses, moved them up and won stakes, and you may be sitting on one, and the reason for that particular horse, and some of the others may have different reasons. You find a niche for a horse, or just that TLC all of a sudden. I think Rich Strike was claimed from Joe Sharp. Joe Sharp is a successful trainer, probably more successful than the guy who claimed a horse, but what happened, so I think that it's it's a good criteria for sure, and it's something to look at, but I think it pulls more weight when you see somebody do it often. Okay. All right. You got lucky. This was a great claim. This was another great claim. But now, 3 out of 5 that you claim are moving way up like that. And we know that just doesn't happen. There's another thing that I look for that's hard to say. And we did a show on rebreaking, which I think is one of our better shows. But there are certain ways that a juiced horse runs and looks that are a little bit different. That's very hard for me. You might be able as a horseman to do it. I can't quantify it. I can't explain it in words. I'm just not smart enough. I just can't articulate in words what it is. But when I see it, I kind of know it. You know what I mean? I see it. I kind of, that just doesn't look kosher to me. And it's not rebreaking. It's not the clock. It's just the way that they run, just this a certain way that they run. And I don't know if you can explain it, or maybe get a better handle on it for people than I can. But do you kind of know what I'm talking about? Like, juice horses have a certain look to them on the racetrack when they run and when they win, as opposed to a horse that's just moving up naturally, or running better naturally, or hitting a peak race, or a horse like your horse who who ran out of his skin that day and looked phenomenal. But there was but he didn't look like a horse that was, quote, juiced. He looked like a horse that ran a huge race. Can you try and explain that? I mean, you did a great job with the rebreaking. And I'm just at a loss. I can't explain it. So maybe you can.
No, so you'll see a certain look in a lot of those types of horses. What I see, so you'll see horses that might have far more muscling on them than they used to have. Putting on muscle, putting on weight is natural when you put a horse in a natural environment, and they, you take good care of them, you train them the right way, know when to push on, know when to back off, and then make sure that the protein in their diet's adequate to put on muscle. But you'll see certain situations where the horse has more than what is natural, right? So you can look at a professional athlete and say, man, that guy, well built, well cut, extremely developed in terms of how he's coming along. And then you can look at, a WWE wrestler and say that's not all natural, right? So you can even see it in people, and you can see it as well in horses. And you have a sense as a horseman of what is 100% natural and what is not. And so it is able to be seen. What I used to notice the most, and I don't know, John, maybe you have noticed this as well, is you'd see some of these horses from these barns that were maybe 10 claimers before and then jump up and turn into these monster horses in grade 1 races. But then you get on the stage with the real horses, right? You can maybe dodge a couple horses and win a grade 1 in different spots. But then you head to the Breeders' Cup, and those horses don't show up. And it's really interesting. And I noticed it over and over the years of when you put some of these horses against the really high caliber horses that are truly grade 1 horses, they don't stack up for whatever reason, whatever's going on. They just don't run the same against the top tier, but they can beat up on some of those other ones when they're maybe the second best horse in the race as a grade 1 horse versus when you're running against all the best in the world. So those were things that sometimes I would see. And it'd make me question a few things, but yeah, you'll see it phenotypically with when they're in the paddock or when they're training on the racetrack, or like maybe you'll see a horse that all he does, and sometimes you need to be in the training environment to see it, to where horse is just jogging, right? Doesn't really gallop, doesn't really breeze, yet the muscles are popping out of its neck. So it's not doing enough work to actively develop that musculature, but somehow that musculature is just being put on. So, I don't know if that explains it a little bit for what people might want to be.
It does, and I can take it a step further, and this is something I really feel bad about sharing, because it's something I'm very conflicted about, because I don't like that aspect of the game. I'm against it. I think we should have zero tolerance and should actually have, I mean, I'm extreme, okay? I think we should have a legitimate police force that just goes after these people and stops them and has like law enforcement powers to just get these guys off the racetrack. I'm a big animal advocate. You know that about me. A lot of people don't publicize, but I'm very much for the animal, and that conflicts me a lot about my love for this game. But I'm gonna share something that I'm not proud of, but it goes exactly to what we're talking about. Several years ago, I spent 2 years at Oaklawn Park, living in Arkansas. Okay, that's a whole nother story in and of itself. But I was there one day, and at the time, what is now the casino, they had a little VIP race section for the big bettors in what is now the casino, and that's where I used to sit every day with a couple of guys that I got friendly with. And one day I was betting, and I had a really bad day. And one of the things that I never do as a bettor is chase money. If I lose, I usually pack up and go home. But this day I was frustrated. I don't remember. It was the way that I lost. And, I really wanted to get my money back. And it was the last race at a racetrack, and the horses were walking around the paddock. And I was looking and saying, is there a way I can possibly bail out and, recover my losses for that day, which were, a couple of $1,000s. And there was a horse in the paddock who I was familiar with, okay, who had been claimed one start back, and ran okay, but looked like he had a trouble trip, and now was running second time back off the claim. And it was a horse I had seen many times before. And he was in the paddock walking around, and I says to the gentleman that I was sitting next to, Guy's name is Al. He's a friend of mine. I said, wow. And he was trained by one of the guys that to this day is suspected of being a quote juice guy. Okay.
Mhm.
That horse looks like a different horse than when I last saw him. He looks like literally Jose Canseco. You know what I mean? When in the height of his steroid days, look at him, he's climbing out of his skin. They're walking him around in the paddock. He can't wait to get to the racetrack. And my friend looks, he goes, you know, you're right. Look at him. I said, the horse is literally, if I had to, put it in, I'd say he's breathing fire. I never seen this horse look like this.
Right.
Yeah. He wants to annihilate these horses. I mean, I forget about it. He was so much of a physical specimen against, and I know it's not a beauty contest. I'm a professional, so I don't bet, beauty contests. But it was like when Mike Tyson fought that Spinks kid, who was it? Michael Spinks, and they met in the center of the ring. You didn't need to know the records. You didn't need to know anything. Spinks looked terrified. Tyson looked like he was going to take his head off. And there was no question who was going to win the fight. They didn't have to throw a punch. They didn't have to ring the bell. The fight was over before they touched gloves. Same thing with this race. I could see it. All right. And I bet the horse a lot of money blindly, just said, you know what? Boom. And ran off the screen. Ran off the screen when, and I was like, I just bet a horse because I believed he was, and that's not something that I'm proud of. Okay. And that's a bad part of the game and a bad on me because I don't like to support that. And I'm certainly not proud of it, but it is part of the game, unfortunately. And all of us who play the game, okay, yourself included, the cleanest guy out there, okay, any trainer, any bettor, any owner, any breeder, okay, we're all complicit in playing this game. And that is, in a way, enabling those guys. So as bad as I feel about myself and as reluctant as I am to share that, we all share that, okay? Because we're playing the game. We know this goes on. And until we stop it, we're all in it. So, I don't look at myself as being alone in that category, but it certainly does bother me. But it goes to what you're saying. It's something that you can just see, all right?
Yeah.
And I saw it and bet on it with that particular horse, and that guy is still out there today, probably doing the same thing.
Well, and if I don't mean to interject yet again, but what I would say though is I tend to see, whether it's on horse racing Twitter or people in conversation, I think people think it's way more prevalent than it actually is. So, the more that I've spent time, and when I was in my own shed where I knew what we did, and I knew we had a tendency to move up horses off of a lot of people, but we did a lot of work to do that, right? So we'd bring in chiropractors. I'd do stretching for horses that had sore glutes or sore shoulders, or, a lot of trainers look knees down, and not a whole lot of people pay attention to the upper part, in terms of the musculature and the spine of these horses, which, that is the engine in these horses. So what I will say is, I think some guys, especially the barn I'm standing in, tend to get misnomered because they're just better. And I've mentioned it to Savvy, and I said, look, I've been around a lot of trainers in this game. I've been around 4 Hall of Famers, and I've been around a lot of great guys. And I said, I'll tell you, you impress me with your level of horsemanship and knowledge on the same par, if not more, than some of the Hall of Famers I worked with. So being able to see things a little bit differently and being able to see outside the box and coming up with an idea of, hey, maybe we should swim this horse a little bit more, or have different ideas that are not traditional in the sport, make a huge difference in performance. So I do think there are guys that get mislabeled as guys who cheat or guys who juice because they have a different thought process. Our game is very, very much traditionally handed down, right? You go work for a trainer, you learn what he learns, then some guys just work for one guy or 2 guys. I was lucky enough to work for 4 or 5 and come up with different ideas to approach situations from different angles. But you will see in this sport sometimes where guys will come in and they're very successful, and people automatically want to label them because they might not have the look of what the sport wants to accept of somebody who could be a successful horseman and a successful trainer. And a lot of it is to me a mislabeling, because they might have worked in a different country and they might have learned completely differently, and then they brought over a new thought process that tended to actually have better results than, you know, the traditional go to the racetrack in America and you can go two directions. You can either go clockwise or counterclockwise, and you can either do that at 3 different speeds, you know, of how we'll term it in racing, pretty much 4, you know, jog, gallop, 2-minute lick, or breeze. And so when you come at it with different ideas, and I used to do it a lot with certain horses, we get major results if I take horses to have them figure 8 in the shoe and change their mindset and then gallop them, or do different things that changed how traditional horses were trained in America. So I think, yes, the guys who use, you know, frog venom, snake venom, the guys who are doing other, you know, nefarious things with horses, there are those guys out there, but I want to let everybody know it is not as rampant as what people would think. I think a lot of it comes down to, you know, case in point, we claimed a horse the other day. This horse is a good horse, but this horse has been constantly plagued by feet problems. And a lot of it comes down to bad shoeing. You know, the barns that he was in have bad blacksmiths. And we knew that when we claimed the horse. And so you take a horse that has bad feet, of course he's going to run poorly. You know, his feet hurt. And then you put him in an operation where you can fix his feet, give him time, let them grow out, and shoe to what actually is really bothering him. And the horse runs lights out. And I'll make this point. I worked with the Tin Man when I was at Richard Mandela's, and the Tin Man didn't have the greatest feet in the world, okay? But Richard really knew how to take care of them. And so he would run in and train in typically a shoe called a spider plate. And that really helped relieve sole pressure on that horse, which kept him sound for the, you know, duration of his career. And there was one race where there was an experiment with a new set of shoes that were supposed to be the best thing in racing, and, you know, best thing ever, and they were called Polyflex shoes. And it's a polyurethane shoe that was supposed to act like a natural hoof, and you glue it on. But what happens when you glue on a shoe, it locks up the heels. And so sometimes what happens when you put Equilocks on a horse's foot, it locks up the heel so much that it jams up heel bulbs, and it doesn't allow the foot to expand how it should expand, which you can get with certain shoes, like different aluminum shoes. And so the horse ran poorly, and his feet were killing him after the race. But so let's take that example and say a horse like that, who's always had bad feet, who's always been in glue-ons, who's always been in the situation where they thought that they were doing the right thing, but they weren't. And then you put him in an operation and they say, you know what, we're going to put spider plates on this horse, or we're going to try this shoe on this horse. Now his foot pain's gone. He's going to run through the roof. Massive change. So I think a lot of it comes down to expertise and knowledge and depth of knowledge. And you'll see some trainers have a ton of depth of knowledge and expertise, and others just know what the guys before them taught them. So I just wanted to point that out, because I do see a lot on Twitter of people thinking so many guys are dirty, and it's not the case. There's just some guys that are just smarter than everybody else.
I agree with that. We're probably at 2 different levels, because you think it's not nearly as prevalent as people do. And so do I, but I think it's more prevalent than you think it is. So we're probably in the middle, but I'm glad you mentioned it, because and I'm glad you mentioned Safi, because, you know, Safi is a guy that people love to bash and love to target and love to accuse of being a juicer. Okay, and they cite his win percentage at Gulfstream Park versus his win percentage at Saratoga. Okay, now we both know that the competition at those 2 places is
significantly different.
Okay, right. And we both know that the type of horses that you have and the type of barn you have is going to greatly impact your success at both of those meets. Okay, we also know that Safi's been established in Florida for several years, and he's only gone up to the spa for a couple of years now. I think, what is this, his 2nd or 3rd year going up there, okay? But right. He's talking with it. And here's the problem, not only with racing, but with society today. And Safi's not the only guy in this category, and I'm tempted to talk about another one, but I think I'm going to steer away from it, because if I do, there's a lot of stuff I know that I don't know that I want to share. But the thing of it is, no matter what you say about Safi and his operation, okay? And this goes across the board today. This is the society we live in. No matter what you say, the people that think Safi cheats, no matter what you tell them, show them, explain to them, you're not going to change anybody's mind. What
100%.
what you're going to do is you're going to alienate those people. They're going to attack you, think you don't know what you're talking about, and just bash you and just bring it to a whole non-intellectual intellectual level. And I don't even want to say a street level, because these are not street people, but that's we live in, and that's why I'm reluctant to share some things I know about another very, very high profile guy that is constantly accused of cheating. And there's one particular story that people mock this trainer for, okay, and say, oh, come on, what kind of excuse? And I happen to have firsthand knowledge that that mock story is 100% true, okay? But there's no point in saying it, because all that'll do is alienate people, start fights, this, that, the thing. And really, honestly, I don't even want to have to mute more people and hear the noise, and just, I'm not going to be bothered getting into that. So, I'm just going to leave it alone. But it's an unfortunate thing that people think, because, hey, we were right about Service and we were right about Navarro, that we're right about everybody that wins at 25 or 30% and 35%. And nobody's going to convince these people different. They're going to think you and I are fools for thinking, that some of them are not cheating, because they think all of them are. I think more of them are than you do, but I certainly agree that it's not nearly as many as get the label. And there are a couple of people that are excellent horsemen, have very, very good barns, have excellent programs that get mislabeled as cheaters. And it's a shame, because you're really disparaging somebody's career unjustly, and social media gives people the power to do that. Anybody can become an expert and an authority and have a voice overnight. And there are some horrendous takes out there on this subject and other subjects in our sport, and other things as well.
Well, I'd like to give actually an interesting example. I'm going to throw myself into the line of fire. So,
okay.
Most people would have watched my career and said, okay, this guy's clean. This guy does a good job. This guy's horses look phenomenal. He claims some and he improves some. And if you want to go with high percentage, I went for a couple months where I had new owners come into the barn, which allowed me to place horses wherever I wanted to place them, right? So when I had started my career, I had to improve horses and run them in races where they did not belong, right? So if you look at my career and some guys are like, oh, you only won at 13%. I'm claiming for 20 and having a race at 35 because the owner doesn't want to lose the horse again for 20. So we went through a span, and I don't know where you could find it in the stats, because typically everything's annual stats, but we went through a stage where I was firing off at 33% and 65% in the money, because I finally had guys said, Mike, if you want to claim for 20, run them back for 20, run them back for 20. Or a horse that was claimed, that was sent to me, that was claimed for 80,000. The owner said, look, I just need a win. I ran him for 62.5, right? And we won. So we were clicking off wins because I could finally place these horses where they were going to be extremely competitive. And so we were winning races and hitting the board right, left, and center. So if you want to bash people just because all of a sudden they are winning at a high percentage, a lot of times it's because you're not able to run horses where you feel that they belong, because an owner loves the horse and he doesn't want to lose the horse, but the horse keeps running in a maiden special weight when it really belongs in the maiden 40, and it belongs in the maiden 40, and you've told him it belongs in the maiden 40, but you just can't put him there. So you have to understand that there are so many nuances in this game, and there's so many. It's interesting. There's a group of gentlemen that I've talked to, and I said, you will be surprised once you get in this sport, how much room there is to actually be successful because of how many people make mistakes. And being able to understand and see those mistakes and capitalize on those mistakes create massive increases in horses' performances. There's a horse I claimed the other day that ended up winning a race for a group of owners, and horse won impressively, but the horse has some muscle soreness in his hind end. But with the turn of foot he displayed, And the fact that he was able to have that turn of foot and run extremely well and win easily makes me say, okay, well, when we back off on this horse, don't train him as hard, kind of help his muscles regenerate in his hind end, this horse is going to be even better. And people say, well, the trainer that it was claimed off of was a very good trainer. And this is so you have to understand there are so many points in this business where if you have people who are extremely detail oriented, picking up on small things, it can make a big difference in performance. And then when you have owners who say, hey, look, you want to claim for 25, improve them and run them back for 25, it's literally walking into a race, being completely loaded because you've taken a horse that was competitive for a price, improved it and ran it right back for that price. So those are some of the points I really want to point out in this show is you've got to give guys credit where they deserve. And I honestly think sometimes, and I feel you see it a lot more, right? So this is going to be a really, really hot topic, but if we have people in our sport that don't have the look that we want, right? They might not look like me. They might not part their hair to the side and wear nice suits. And, they might have a Latin last name or they might be from a different country. If they're successful, a lot of guys immediately bash them or write them off or say, hey, this guy's cheating. This is not natural. They want to believe that a certain image is what the image is of a successful trainer. And they don't want to give guys who, do you get where I'm going with it? I don't want to say racist, but there is parts of that in this business where people will say, well, he's a Latin trainer and all Latin trainers drug horses. You hear this stuff. It drives me crazy sometimes, but good horsemen can come from anywhere. I used to get frustrated with sometimes being from California, and you've seen it with Baffert, right? Baffert had to win a Triple Crown before the guys in Kentucky would give him his due and start sending him horses, right? He trained for specific guys that were his guys forever. And then he won a Triple Crown and the guys say, okay, fine, we'll start sending you our horses. But I've seen it as I've traveled the world. The Irish think they're the best horsemen. The English think they're the best horsemen. Americans think they're the best horsemen. But you've got guys that come from Mexico. They're born on farms.
The French think they're the best everything.
Well, exactly. So you get guys and there's guys that are literally born on quarter horse farms in Mexico, right? If you look at the top guys, and people might not want to realize this because it took them a while to get their due. Pletcher got his due a little bit quicker, but Asmussen where's Asmussen from, right? He's from Texas.
Yeah.
You've got Baffert, who's from Arizona. You got Todd Pletcher, who's from Baffert's from New Mexico, Arizona. And then you've got Pletcher, who again is quarter horse background from down, I don't remember if it's Arizona, New Mexico, but he was on those circuits in those regions with his father. So you get these cowboys, and some people don't want to give cowboys their due until they really, really show out and transform into the image of what we think a successful racehorse trainer should look like and act like and appear like. So I see it in the sport a lot where people don't want to give trainers their due of being great horsemen because they don't fit the image of what we feel that they should fit as a trainer in our sport. Interesting.
And I think there's probably something to that. And, there's something else to it too. And this is something a lot of people will argue against, but it's human nature, and you can't get around human nature no matter how you try. But when you have a voice from the public, from social media, involving a game that involves gambling like ours does, people that are successful and win with certain trainers are going to like them and defend them, and people that lose to certain trainers are going to get envious and jealous and hate those guys and be faster to label them cheating, because when we lose money, whether we want to or not, it makes it difficult to be objective about why we lost money. And I think that causes some people to mislabel people as well. But it's a very tough part of our sport and it's one of many reasons why I think we've got to somehow develop a zero tolerance towards it, and a way to adequately police it. I do not believe that HISA is the answer to that question. I think they're a step in the right direction, maybe. I'm not even 100% sure of that, but I believe that they could be. But I think it's got to go way, 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 way further than that. Our sport will always be flawed while any of these people are allowed to participate in it. And I think we've got to get very, very good at identifying the cheaters from the guys that are mislabeled, and just high percentage guys, or guys that are playing the game at a higher and better level than some of the other guys. And there are a few out there that I feel are in that category, and there are a few out there that I feel are possibly and probably not doing things on the up and up. And that's the fine line that we've got to find a way to bridge. And I'm hoping, that this episode can kind of shed some light on some of those things.
I think you did touch on something though, and I do think HISA will actually be a little bit better, because when you dig into those rules, right? So some of the rules don't 100% make sense, but it'll literally get to a point where you can maybe only use minor therapeutic things on horses, like clay and poultice on their legs and ice boots and small things. I mean, I think they need to explore the rules a little bit more, because they're looking sometimes at, there's therapeutic machines back here like a MagnaWave, which really is great for musculature and soft tissue in terms of releasing tension and helping create blood flow to an area to increase healing. And sometimes people will think that those types of therapies should be not allowed, which there's no problem with certain things, right? I remember talking to a trainer, and he says, I'm terrified, because literally they're just going to allow me to put ice boots and clay on a horse, and I can't help it in any other way. And so I think there's going to be a balancing act over time with HISA to figure out, okay, these things are therapies that actually help. This is very beneficial to horses and healing them and helping them be healthy in a racing environment. And these are things like shockwave, which used to be a healthy therapy, which was then, because you can't test for a horse at shockwave, some guys started shockwaving horses before races and numbing them so they could run while being shockwaved. So again, it comes down to the abuse of things that are legal. And part of it is, I think it will level the playing field, because they're pretty much going to get rid of almost everything. And I can't say that for real, but when you look at the rules, sometimes you're like, well, can I even paint the horse's foot with like a hoof oil? Because it'll say a horse's feet can't be painted on race day, or you can't wrap a horse's foot with vet wrap, because the reason why they don't want the horse's foot being wrapped with vet wrap is they're afraid that you're putting a substance on the hoof that's going to numb the hoof, and then you wrap it in vet wrap so it's not seen. But case in point, there was the other day, there's a horse I mentioned, Kissalot, grabbed a quarter in a breeze, right? So when you ship a horse to a race, you want to wrap their feet in vet wrap to prevent, if they step on themselves again, they re-injure the grab quarter. Well, when you say, well, you can't wrap a horse's foot in vet wrap because we're afraid that people are doing nefarious things, you can't help a horse either from re-injuring itself. So there's certain things where, again, it comes down to people abusing things that were perfectly fine before, that then just make it more difficult for everybody. But saying that, I think you're going to see a huge shift, because a lot of the stuff that was previously allowed is not going to be allowed anymore. And it's literally getting to a point where, again, everybody said hay, oats, and water, and a lot of it back here is hay, oats, and water. But anyways, my point is, and I don't mean to, there's certain things that you can help horses with that won't hurt them, that aren't cheating, that aren't anything else. And you don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But what a lot of trainers are worried about is, with how stringent some of these HISA rules are, some of these things, like a simple paint on a horse's leg to help create blood flow to a region, I completely disagree with blistering a horse. Like, that's what I want to put out there. Some people will put paint on a horse's leg with a shin and blister them and think that that's 100% fine. I disagree. You're causing pain to a horse. But when you use that same solution once, and you give it 2 days, 2 days off, and you paint it again, it's a counter irritant. It doesn't create the blistering and the scabbing and the things that other people are trying to do with that paint. So there, overall, we're taking a massive step forward on a horse welfare and safety front. So I'm really applauding that with HISA, but you have to look at some of the things a little bit more closely as we get through time to make sure that the therapeutics that are really just here to help these horses are allowed to help these horses.
And I'm glad you brought that up, and I'll share something that ties right into this. Okay. I know your wife is a vet, but she's around the racetrack. Okay. She's around race horses. Okay. Because of some of the stuff that I get involved with, and because of my personal life, I have access and deal with a lot of non-racetrack vets, off-track vets, okay, that are not involved in our game at all. And I take every opportunity that I can to discuss these issues with them, okay? And I hear a lot of trainers and a lot of on-track veterinarians that have opinions and especially trainers, very strenuous opinions about what horses need and what helps them and what doesn't. And what initially, when I started having these conversations with off-track veterinarians, what immediately hit me in the face was the complete contrast in opinion as to what should and shouldn't be allowed, okay? And I would say that in off-track veterinarians, now you can always argue, well, they're not around horses, but they don't really know, but they're vets. So I think they do know. Okay, I'm going to give them that benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say, a doctor who's not around the NFL can still, an orthopedic surgeon who's not around sports and not around the NFL can still repair a torn meniscus as good as anybody else who is, maybe better. Okay. The contrast in opinion is huge. Okay. And most of these off-track vets are of the opinion that I would go as far as to say 90% of the stuff that we do and we condone as helping horses shouldn't be needed. That most of the opinion I get is that if you have to do that, the horse needs time. If you have to do this, the horse should get a break. If you have to do that, the horse should not be racing. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
And you won't get that on the racetrack at all, because on the racetrack, as much as we say it's about the horse, money is involved. Okay. Trainers have to make money. Owners have to make money. The tracks have to make money. They have to generate handle. They want horses running. Okay. Vets want horses in the barns so they can treat them. They don't want them on a farm resting up. Okay. And we live in a world, in a society of, oh, you're sick, we're not going to cure it. Take a pill, you'll feel better. We don't have to cure it. Okay. That is the society we live in. And that has permeated itself into the racing world and every other aspect of our daily lives. But when you get away from the racetrack and talk to veterinarians and get their opinion on some of the stuff that we routinely practice and say is okay, I get a completely different answer. What are you, nuts? You guys do this, you guys do that, and you say you love the horse. That horse needs time. This horse needs this. This horse needs that. That horse shouldn't even be racing. This is the kind of stuff I get. People can't tell us you love the horses. You don't. And it's hard for me to argue with them. And the only argument is, well, you don't know because you're not around a racetrack. And like I said, I don't buy that. So you get a completely different opinion when you get off the backside and off the racetrack about what's good and what's bad. Now, shockwave, I'm glad you mentioned it, because a lot of people don't understand it and what it is. And running a horse right after the shockwave when they're numb, feeling no pain, is not something you can test for. And it's different than that other, what is that? That Magna, what do you call it? The
Magna wave, yeah.
Magna wave, right? Which is therapeutic and okay. So it's so tough. And you mentioned earlier about you know, a lot of these horses not showing up in the Breeders' Cup. I think the Breeders' Cup, when you look at their rules and their out of competition testing and everything that they've set forth, I think they're pretty good. I think they do a great job at trying to keep the playing field in the Breeders' Cup level. Okay.
Yes.
And
Yes.
out of competition testing that they do, which they do frequently. Okay. There are two very, very well-known successful trainers. Okay. Bob Baffert and Brad Cox. Okay.
Right.
Both get the finger pointed at them constantly as being cheaters. And when I say cheaters, I don't mean legal overages of therapeutic medications, which we know Bob has had issues with. Okay.
Right.
When they point those fingers at him, that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about juicing. When they talk about Brad Cox, they're talking about juicing. Now you look at those two guys, okay, and they win at the Breeders' Cup as much as they win away from the Breeders' Cup. And let me tell you something, their horses are scrutinized by the Breeders' Cup more than the average guy who comes in. The out of competition testing that takes place on Bob's horses and Brad's horses is much more than a lot of the other guys out there, okay? And they have the same success rate. So
Right.
I'm not going to say who's cheating and who's not cheating, but I'm going to say this. If those guys are juicing, okay, and able to do it at the Breeders' Cup on the biggest stage with illicit, banned, illegal substances that nobody knows about under that kind of scrutiny where they're watched like public enemy number one, okay?
Right.
Then we should just close this video now, pack up, go home, and forget horse racing because it's beyond ever being repaired or restored to the glory days. That's what I will say.
Well, and I'll give you your due on that because I've run Breeders' Cup horses in the operations that I've been in, right? And so I can tell you the scrutiny leading up to the Breeders' Cup, you have 24-hour security for at least a week with a lot of these horses. You got security bars, guards sitting in the barn right in front of the stalls of these horses. And in barns, we have multiple horses. There's multiple security guards. So number one. Number two, which I think is phenomenal with the Breeders' Cup, and I really have to take my hat off to them, and I think we need to do that more and more with our bigger races, is they do multiple vet checks, right? So you'll come and they'll jog up the horse one day, jog up the horse another day, and jog it up on race day. So they've seen it before it's been pre-raced, and they've seen it after it's been pre-raced, and they've checked it multiple times, then multiple blood samples on it. So there is one thing, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds on this, but when you check a horse on race day, just for soundness on race day, there are a lot of things that can be done, like warming up a horse, walking it for 35 minutes, jogging it up and down the shed row. So when the state vet comes, the horse is sound, right? And then the horse gets past the state vet and runs in a race, and but you can't do that on the Breeders' Cup, which is why I think, and I like what California does, is they have to be checked before they breeze. They have to be checked before they run. Those horses are seen by vets in California 3 to 4 times a week because you're checking them post-breeze, you're checking them pre-breeze, you're checking them before races. The vets are seeing these horses a lot, and a lot of the times in barns where there's great vets who are very ethical, they're not going to let a horse breeze that has an issue. They're not going to let a horse run because that vet has to sign off on his license that he saw that horse and said that horse was okay to breeze or run. And the state vet has to look at it. So you have 2 boxes checked. So the more we can do to where we have things where pre-race testing, right? Some of this stuff with this talk of Medina Spirit, if they did pre-race blood testing, they would have known, right? They would have said, you know what, you've got betamethasone in the system. This horse needs to be scratched. Versus having it on the public stage of we tested him and now he tested positive and now it's a big PR issue. If they did the same type of testing that the Breeders' Cup does for the Derby and a lot of our bigger grade 1 races, and the same type of health checks and safety checks on all of these horses, it would massively change the sport in terms of health, welfare, and safety of all these horses.
So here's my question to you. No brainer. Why don't they? Why Churchill Downs, Kentucky Derby? Arguably a bigger race than the Breeders' Cup, right? Most famous race in the United States. Why don't they do that?
I don't know.
Shouldn't every horse that's on the point list of the Kentucky Derby be subject to pre-competition testing? Is that not a no-brainer?
Yeah, to me, it makes a lot of sense, right?
No-brainer.
Yeah, you have
a no-brainer, man.
So those are the things, and I think, and that's where I'm hoping HISA can really bring some continuity of saying, look, this is the protocol that we expect to have happen for all major races, and not even major. That eventually needs to filter down to the claiming ranks, because some people don't understand why I got out of the game in the first place. There's multiple reasons. One, people owed me $65,000 in debt of unpaid bills towards me being a trainer.
You're not out of the game, so go ahead.
Well, as a trainer, right? And then there were other situations where owners were pressuring me to run horses that I didn't feel should run. But one of the things that really frustrated me was when I'm standing on the rail of a racetrack and watching a horse just stepped on the racetrack with vet wrap, jog off, and the horse is lame. Now, when a horse has vet wrap on, it's going to do one thing. That's breeze, okay? So seeing horses in other operations walk onto the racetrack that had lameness issues that trainer was then going to go breeze, I thought was ridiculous. And I thought, hey, this needs to be looked at. And that's why, again, I have to say to California, I love what they do. Those horses have to be checked. You can't breeze a lame horse in California. They'll never let you. Because, and that's why, obviously, a lot of the issues in California and the fatalities and breakdowns have completely gone down, because those horses that are breezing, you can guarantee are sound. And when they're running, they're sound. And so the more we do that on every single level of the sport, the better the sport gets overall.
I agree emphatically. And there are going to be cases where we still have incidents, and I'll go back to a Breeders' Cup very recently, or relatively recently.
I remember that race. Yeah,
Mongolian Groom, was that the name of the horse? Okay.
Yeah.
Who did break down during the Classic, and there was talk in a jog he looked off or unsound, and I'm not good enough to see that. Okay, and I don't know if you remember or saw the video, but I can't.
I remember. Yeah.
Okay, some people can look at a video and say it. Some people. Sometimes I think I know what I'm looking at, but I'm the first to admit I'm not a horseman, so I'm not gonna, throw my 2 cents into that ring because I don't know. But there were some people that said he did look off, and there were some people that said he looked fine. And my thought is, hey, with all the scrutiny on the Breeders' Cup that year in particular, because that was a hot year for that particular subject, especially in California, I was like, there's no way if this horse is off, they're going to let him run. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can't see it. You know what I mean? So whoever's saying he's off, they may think they know, but I don't think they know. I gotta go with the vets who were signing off on him, and sure enough, there was an incident. So you're going to have those kind of situations. Can you talk a little bit about what your observation in that case?
So, yeah, I thought the horse was off, to be honest.
So how did you get past the vets in California?
I don't know in that specific circumstance. I think after that happened, they really tightened down. And this is what I also think. And you brought up a great point, and it's a double-edged sword, right? So I think, again, and we've talked about it on our show, of racing soundness and how I think that's a bullshit excuse, right? Horses racing sound. Racing sound means the horse is sound enough to get around the racetrack, hopefully, right? Sound is sound. Sound means the horse is 100%. Racing sound means the horse might not be 100%, but it's capable of racing. So I think the more that we bring in vets who are not racetrack vets to be doing the pre-race vetting of these horses, which, again, if you have somebody who's, a small animal vet who all of a sudden you're throwing into the ring, which tends to happen with the government, they'll put small animal vets going to Tennessee walking horse shows, and sometimes you need to make sure that the people who are being employed are equine vets. When HISA does come in and they start regulating more, they need to be equine vets. But it would be great if they're not necessarily racetrack vets, because they might, you have a dressage vet or somebody else who works in the equine world, knows what a lame horse looks like, knows how it is, and will have less tolerance than a racetrack vet, because over time on the backside, things tend to get accepted because it's how it's always been.
Right. Spot on. And I'm glad you said that. And I'll share another little something. We have a family farm, for lack of a better term, where we've got a bunch of rescued horses on it. Not only thoroughbreds, some Mustangs as well. You know about that whole Mustang problem out
Yeah, yeah.
in the Midwest. We've got some of them. And the vet who takes care of or consults on those horses is not a racetrack vet, but certainly knows their way around a horse and has grown up around horses and breeding horses and riding horses and whatnot. And if this particular vet was in charge of doing these pre-race exams, you'd think we have small fields now?
Yeah.
You'd see some really, really small fields, but so it's a very tough part of our sport. You know, it really is. And I'm optimistic like you are about HISA. You know, all these trainers that are complaining about them. I get the concerns. I get some of the legalities. You know, hey, they're allowed to come in anybody's house that's a trainer and check for all of these different things. What about search and seizure? What about my rights? What about I get all of that, but you know, racing and training is a special license. And when you want to be licensed to do something, sometimes you got to comply with certain types of rules and scrutiny to keep things on the up and up. And it is what it is. It's a fine line. We'll see how it shakes out. I support them. I think we should really make this a two-part episode because there's a lot more I want to talk about. It's a really deep dive kind of conversation. We can get really more into it and get a little bit more gritty. And if enough people ask, and I got a question for you from a viewer that we have to ask you. So we'll close out with that. And I think we'll revisit this for another episode and a continuation of this cheating and win percentage thing and whatnot. And if enough people ask, I will share the story about the ridiculous excuse that everybody goes, well, it can't possibly be true, that I happen to know for a fact is true. But enough people would have to ask to get me to do it because I really don't want to do it. But someone did. We'll close out with this and then we'll do another show on this because we don't want to make a movie here. And we already did. So somebody asked me, the War of Will Colt that you were talking about at the sales that you liked.
Right.
That went for, I think, 479. They wanted to know, and it's on the YouTube channel. They asked us on the YouTube channel.
Right.
I'm sure Michael will answer, but you haven't seen it yet. So they want to know if you bid on that horse.
The Warfront Colt?
Yeah. Oh, no, I said War of Will, the Warfront. Okay.
Yeah. So to be honest, he was a horse that I thought was going to go for way too much money. So anyways, he was bought by Qatar Racing. He's going to Joseph O'Brien. So I actually talked to Joseph after they bought him and said, look, I think you guys really got a nice horse here. We, at that sale, decided to sit that one out because it was an extremely pricey sale. And then heading into the New York bred sale, you know, we helped the client purchase 3 different horses out of the New York bred sale. So I thought he was the best horse. I would have loved to have had him. Really would have enjoyed putting that horse in somebody's barn, but no, I did not bid on that horse that day. And not because I didn't want to, but because our client said there would be better value at the New York bred sale and better value at Keeneland. And so saved the money for those 2 sales.
Right. And when you're working, you know, in all fairness, when you're working with a certain budget or have a certain type of goal, you can think a horse is the best horse in the sale and just not go after him because he just doesn't fit your needs and or your budget and or your client's budget. You know what I'm saying? So you know, that's that. What about the other horse that we were talking about that I was so high on that I said I'd give you $1 million on the blind for? I forget. Was it a Leslie's Lady or was it something, a half to Mendelssohn or was it?
We're talking the half to Matoli. Yeah.
Right. The half to Matoli. What
yeah.
wound up happening to that one?
RN8, I think, for 1.7 million.
Wow. Okay. I was going to give you $1 million on a blind to buy that one. You told me it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough.
Yeah. So yeah, it was interesting being in the ring and seeing that one go through. And there was another horse who went for over 2 million and a couple others that were in the high ones. And, you know, at 1.7, that horse RNA'd. So that horse did not sell. I think, I don't know what the plan is with it.
Were people bidding on him for less than that?
Well, I think the bidding was active, but I think,
right.
And this is kind of what you see in some of these sales, especially the Saratoga Select sale, is people will get excited with what they put as a reserve on a horse, judging by how much action they get on that horse. So from what I know, I believe that horse was owned by Larry Best. And so he doesn't need to sell him, I think. And he was keeping him if he didn't get the price that he wanted. I don't quote me if I'm wrong, but that's what I thought I remembered hearing at the sale, that was his horse and he'd put the horse up for sale. And, you know, he buys a lot of nice horses anyway. So if he doesn't get the price that he thinks he wants, he can go ahead and just race him himself.
Right. Gotcha. I gotta follow that one. So, so it's pointless now going offer him $1 million. He's turned down one, but yeah, he didn't get a 1.7. So, oh well.
No, yeah.
I'd have thrown $1 million in a hat on the blind and even considered going partners because I just like Matole so much. Even though you knocked him a little bit, you did knock him a little bit, but I still think he's going to turn out to be a good side.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the thing is, as you see with more and more of these stallions in Kentucky, it's all about pedigree. So when you're half to Hot Rod Charlie and a half to Matole, you know, and you're by the leading sire in the country, you know, there's a good shot that not only you might not make it as a racehorse, but you do have a good potential career as a stallion.
Okay, now let's close out with this because it's an exciting day for you. I said we were going to close out with the question, but tomorrow you're running into Smarty Jones, man.
Yeah.
All right, what's the itinerary? When you leaving for good old Parks? I remember when it was Keystone, for crying out loud. So
yeah. So the goal is, I think I'll get up in the morning and drive for 4 hours to Parks, and then we'll get there and kind of enjoy the day and hope everything works out the way that we're hoping for it to.
How did that field come up? I have not had a chance to look yet.
It's not the easiest race in the world, but it's not, you know, you've got Pioneer of Medina in there. You've got Golden Alchemist from Chad Brown. You've got, I believe, Creative Minister ended up going in the race too.
He is, yeah.
So it's a solid field. You know, it's not a walkover type race, but, you know, the horse has been training phenomenal. We're up against the fence with, he did grab some quarters in his breeze last out, and we're working to try and make sure that that's 100% by race day. They're looking pretty good today. So as of today, sorry, I'm swatting at flies. Saratoga is really good for flies in the morning. Yeah. So the plan is to ship him in the morning, and then I'll go in the morning as well.
Okay. Is he the speed? Have you got a chance to look at the PPs yet? Because now I'm excited. Tomorrow's usually a dark day for me. Now I'm going to be screaming for a Kissalot.
So
and the home team.
To be honest, I don't think we need the lead. I think if he gets the lead and he's free running on the lead, I think he's fine. I think this horse is an extremely competitive horse, and he'll run at anything at any time. In the mornings, he actually trains on Clare Court because he gets a little bit too tough on the main track. And he's not very easy horse to gallop. So Clare Court, which is a half-mile track at Saratoga, keeps him a bit more quiet. So we're in post 8. I think we've got to break from there and just see where the horse puts us. I don't think he's a horse that can't stalk leaders and close on horses. Okay,
let me ask you this. Is Jose going? I believe he is, correct?
Jose is going and Jose is riding, yes.
Okay, did he have any thoughts that you can share?
We haven't talked about it yet. I mean, I saw him yesterday and the day before, but we haven't really talked about it. I have joked with Irad. I know we're trying to get the both of them on the show and say, you know, we need to get the show done before the race because Irad might not want to talk to us after the race. So we'll just see how it all plays out.
We'll get him afterwards. He's a good sportsman. But
yeah.
No, what I meant was, did Jose have any input as to, I think we should go? And he was ready to give you the call?
We didn't talk about the race and tactics. That'll all be talked about tomorrow at the race.
Right. No, I meant I meant go, not as go to the lead. I meant go to the race. Like, did he say, let's
no, everybody's excited. Actually, I just see the horse right now. He's out of his stall. We're looking at him right now. So
can we get a picture of him or no?
He's walking right back in. He's about to enter the stall. He's on the other side of the shed row. So I just saw him come out. So yeah, he's a nice horse. He's a nice, improving 3-year-old. I personally think, and you know, the ownership group, we're all extremely excited. He's a horse that's just going to keep getting better and better. And obviously, his dad was a very good horse as an older horse, and we think he's going to get better as he keeps maturing. So, you know, we'll just see how everything shakes out. I'll tweet out tomorrow what we're looking at and how everything's looking and thinking and so on and so forth. I just don't have all those answers right now.
That's good. His daddy won the Breeders' Cup Classic, Fort Larn.
Exactly. And look, another Adina Springs bred horse won the, Moira won the race yesterday. So I told
Can you
Dominic, I
touch
said,
on
"Heck,
that? Can you touch on that a little bit? Was that one of those races that was really as good as it looked with that filly, or was that one of those races that, well, she really didn't beat nothing and maybe it looked better than it really was? Because visually, at first glance, she ran like a monster.
she was impressive." To be honest, I didn't really watch the race. I saw the replay last night, and thought it was, I mean, they obviously think a lot of her, right? She debuted in a stake. She didn't even debut in a maiden. She debuted and won a stake. Or did she win the stake first time out? I think she ran like second or third, and then she broke her maiden in the stake next time out. Obviously an impressive filly, but what is so interesting, and you see it so much in this game, Frank Stronach still breeds phenomenal horses. I mean, Dina Springs, she's a Dina Springs bred. Kissalot's a Dina Springs bred. You know, they're good horses. So hats off. I remember when he kept winning the Eclipse Award for top breeder. You know, it's amazing when you see these programs that just keep churning out good horse after good horse after good horse. So
yeah, no, love to see it. I mean, the first thing that I thought of, you know, after they hit the wire is, wow, I wish she'd run in the Alabama.
yeah.
That would have been interesting, but didn't happen. But you never know what we'll see down in the future. Anyway, go get him tomorrow. Smarty Jones, possibly a prelude to the Grade 1 $1 million Pennsylvania Derby.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. It's just blessed to be able to be a part of that. Yeah.
Off a Mike Wilson claim. So nice. Nice one for the resume. Great job already, regardless of what happens tomorrow. And thank you, everybody, for watching. We're going to do more on this juicing, cheating, win percentage thing. But right now, for the rest of the week, we're going to be rooting for Kissalot in Pennsylvania. So safe travels. Go get the money. Ciao for now.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
On this card, the 7-3. It's just because who might come out of it.
No argument.
Yeah.
That's one of those maiden races at Saratoga you love to watch. The bad race in that same race, Haughty, who I thought was really going to be a nice horse, and won on that horrible course at Penn National when you know it was just really bogged down with rain, and I thought, okay, if she could win on that.
Watch Saratoga today on Past the Wire TV with Dawn Lupel and Jonathan Stettin. Every Saturday morning of the meet, horses to play and to play against, vulnerable favorites, track trends, winning angles, the scope, and more. Watch, subscribe, ride with us. Nobody does it better.
Standard and past performance information is now free exclusively on DRF Bets. Join DRF Bets with the promo code WINNING. Get a $250 first deposit match bonus, a $10 free bet, and free formulator already uploaded to your account. Access formulator's premium features, including sortable trainer stats, race replays, personalized trip notes, and lots more. Free formulator exclusively on DRF Bets.
Nobody does it better.